Welcome to Citizens of Tech, show number 1. You guys know me. I'm Ethan Banks, and you know me from the Packet Pushers podcast. This is a new show that we're experimenting with, and the idea here is to not talk about deep diving on networking and all that kind of stuff that you're used to hearing me and Greg Farrow talk about. Instead, this is a show just for nerds about tech, because a lot of us that work in IT, we just love tech. And joining me is a co-host that hopefully we're going to be doing this together week by week, as he and I have been planning this thing together for a while, Mr. Eric Sutphin. And Eric, why don't you introduce yourself to the Citizens of Tech audience?
Sure thing. Well, I am a lifelong tech nerd. Ever since I was a kid, playing and tinkering and breaking and then subsequently trying to unbreak computers and, any gadget that I could get my hands on. Always needed to know how things worked. And so I took apart the dishwasher and I took apart bicycles and I took apart computers and got scolded and had to put them back together, things like that. So, and then on a career front, I've come up through everything from help desk, as the launching point for a career, up to systems admin, engineer, and now currently the IT infrastructure manager for a software as a service company. So I've sort of run the gamut on the IT side of things. And that's, it's par for the course when you have a love of tech to sort of try to dive into it in any capacity that you can.
So when you were talking about the taking things apart and putting things back together as a child, okay, this is me. So here's a memory for you. One, I had this telescope when I was 5 or 6 or something like that. It came in, it was a telescope with 3 sections, and you could, depending on how far you pulled the thing out, you could see further away and get things into focus and all that stuff. Okay. I had a little accident with this thing one day. It fell off the edge of my desk or something, fell on the floor, and the end of it popped off and all the lenses fell out. And so I remember now. It was actually at the kitchen table, and my mother was there and my aunt or something was there. And they just saw the lenses, and they all fell out in order. And the lenses had little plastic spacers between them, but they all fell out together, and they threw them all back into the tube, and it was all good. And everything should have been working fine. Only me, being the guy that has to take things apart, said, no, they couldn't have got that back together right. So I popped the cap back off and took them all back out and started screwing with things. And forever after, it was like looking into a kaleidoscope. I could never get the thing to work right at all after that. I was that kid. And a set of binoculars. I took those freaking things apart and put them back together too. Bicycles.
Yep.
There was a bicycle that was at my grandmother's house that belonged to my cousin or something. And it wasn't rideable. There was something wrong with it. I figured it out. Whatever it was, I got it sorted, and I was riding that bike. It was a girl's bike, but I was not too proud because I put it together.
It's neither here nor there. I took my sister's bike apart, which had that banana seat. This is the 80s, so it had that banana seat and unicorn streamer handles and all that. And I didn't have the most success getting that back together, honestly, and she wasn't too happy about that. My dad had to step in on that one. But taking things apart to see how they work, I think that's most nerds can probably identify with this.
Well, all right, let's talk about Citizens of Tech. So our idea for this show is just to be nerds talking about nerdy tech. And this isn't going to be just digital stuff. It's also going to be biotech or power or cars or whatever it is that we've been reading in the tech news that's interesting to us. And we thought we'd do this in a 3-segment format. At least that's what we're going to try. We'll start out with talking about the present, news of the day, things that we saw that were interesting. Then we thought we'd take a look back at the past, stuff we loved when we were kids or stuff that was just, cool in the past, really awesome scientists, anything tech-related from history that we think is awesome and we want to talk about. And then we'll look ahead to the future, stuff that's coming on the horizon, either real soon or maybe way off, but that we think is really interesting to us, and we'll tip our hats towards what's coming soon. Or not that soon. Whatever. Things of the future. That's the big idea.
The future.
So let's hop into the news with stuff coming from the present, or stuff of the present, with a story from TechCrunch about Coin. And this article says, one credit card to rule them all. The idea here with Coin is that you get this physical device, some kind of a physical token that you can pair to up to 8 cards of your own. Those could be your credit cards, debit cards, your loyalty cards, these sorts of things. You can manually enter them into the coin. You can, it comes with a little card reader you can plug into the headphone jack, so you could slide the card that way to enter it. You could take a picture of it. And all those things go into your coin. Okay, and then Coin uses 128-bit encryption over Bluetooth and to secure communications between itself and the phone. And the idea there is to prove that you're present when you're using the coin. And so the whole thing here, to use it, you press a button. Coin wakes up. It looks for your phone to unlock itself. If your phone isn't there, you can unlock it manually with a 6-digit PIN. And then once it's alive, you can use it like a regular credit card. The thing stays awake and alive for 7 minutes. And the point of this, I mean, there's other technology that's like this in the mobile payment space. But the news bit of this is that these guys are finally going active and starting to ship the product. But are they too late to the game, I think is the question.
Yeah, I mean, Apple Pay is obviously the big dog on the block here. And then there's Samsung Pay and, Noun Pay. Just insert a noun and put pay on the end. Someone's coming up with something. However, I don't know that it's too late for a new company to come in with a new idea, a new take on it. I mean, where you can have these 8 cards, Apple Pay being specific to your phone, not tied to any other device or card or anything. I think they are bringing something to the table here. And yes, there's a huge install base already out there with Apple Pay, just millions and millions and
by
millions
default,
of iPhones.
Right. Yep.
They have to be the biometrically enabled iPhones for Apple Pay to work, I believe.
I thought that was part of the unlock scheme. So your 4 doesn't work, but your 5 and up does.
Right. Yeah. You need to have your biometric entry for it to unlock. So I can see this having a place. There still are, millions and millions of Android phones out there as well. So if this is the solution that's going to unify the Android platform, they could actually make something of this. And if you don't necessarily require a phone to interact with it as well, potentially this is a gap fill for people that aren't ready to embrace, I'm paying with my phone. People that can't wrap their head around that necessarily.
One of the examples they gave in the article about Coin was when the thing's unlocked, you can then hand it to the waiter at the restaurant so you can go and scan your card. That kind of thing. So, I mean, it's useful to still have a physically present card of some kind.
Sure.
I'll tell you, one thing that's annoying to me is carrying around a bunch of cards in my wallet. So I have a debit card, I have a credit card, and then other cards. If I could consolidate that into one physical thing and still use it the same, if it's convenient enough, that works for me.
And I like the idea of being able to send the card away and it won't work without the presence of your phone or your PIN number, because one of the things, you go to a restaurant and you send the waiter off with your credit card. What's he doing with that?
Right.
While he's gone or she's gone, snap a photo of the front, snap a photo of the back, and shopping spree,
Yes.
So if you can mitigate that with technology like this, it's a no-brainer to me.
Well, it's another case of speaking of that specific issue, the U.S. kind of being behind the times, because in Europe and even in Canada, a chip and PIN, much more common. Bringing the swipe to your table side is much more common. People disappearing with your credit card into the black nethers of the restaurant, much less common.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And like tipping too.
Okay, another bit of tech here. We ran into an article where it says Disney's got a new 3D printer. You're like, ooh, Disney's got a 3D printer. How awesome is that? It's just kind of weird.
I'm going to print Mike Wazowski.
Yeah. What's interesting about this printer is that it's making huggable things out of fabric was the headline. And here's the whole idea of this. Most 3D printers are going to be making an object out of something that's very hard and unfriendly. As far as that goes, what if you want to print something awesome and cute for your little kid? You can't give them that. You want something huggable, right? So this thing, this 3D printer from Disney makes a 3D object out of felt. So felt is, this, if you've never seen it before, it's like a thick fabric. You'd use it for, crafts and, various other things. And the idea is the machine builds this thing up layer by layer and then cuts shapes out of it. And then the felt is adhesive. And so the whole thing kind of gloms together in a big block. And then when it's all done printing, you just tear off the excess bits from the outside. And what you're left with is some cute little critter. I don't know that it's that practical. But.
It's like crafting without the crafting.
Yeah. Something like
so if you have, you know someone that's artsy craftsy and they spend hours and hours crafting something, I'm just going to press print and peel off the outside of it. There's my craft. I'm done.
I don't know where Disney goes with this thing. I mean, it was just interesting. I was like,
One of the things that when I was looking at this, they said is, it's not even so much about the finished product that's going to come out of this. It's about the research and the laboratory that they've built to design this in tech breeds tech. So, they've got the facility there to continue research into further 3D printing and things. So, I mean, maybe it's not useful, but it's interesting and something may come from it in the future. So the next item up on the list here is the portable Raspberry Pi laptop. It's a do-it-yourself kit that uses a 5-inch TFT module and a Pi Juice battery module.
Now, I'm going to assume most of you nerds know what a Raspberry Pi is, right? It's the super small, you can hold it in your hand, full-blown PC.
System on a board. Yep.
USB powered. It's got an SD card slot. It's got an HDMI port and an Ethernet jack. And I have one downstairs that I've been messing with. I paid less than $100 for it with a case. You can run Python on it. It comes with, kind of a Linux distro. So now they're saying, turn this thing into a portable laptop.
Yeah. So it's a great laptop that uses, an external keyboard and an external mouse and a 5-inch screen. And it's a very cool project. You can either build laser cut or 3D print your case for the screen. But again, it's not going to be very practical. You got to lug all this stuff around. There's something to be said for it. Here I am. I'm lifting my laptop that's in front of me.
He is lifting his laptop right now.
It's really amazing. It's going through the air and everything. There's something to be said for a single piece unit, but the idea of taking a Raspberry Pi and turning it into a portable device is appealing just because I can, because reasons.
Street cred, yeah. I mean, it uses the Pi Juice battery and the TFT screen. So when you're out and about with your wireless keyboard and mouse to your Raspberry Pi, there is nothing nerdier than that, would be why it caught my attention.
I'm just picturing sitting down like on a train and putting the screen down, on the opposite seat or something, and sitting with your keyboard and looking at people like, what's up? Yeah. I'm doing this. Look at you with your mobile phone and your laptop.
Another bit of news. Google wants to speed up the web with its QUIC protocol. QUIC, the QUIC protocol. All right, let's talk about this thing for a minute, because if you've followed Google a bit and if you use the Chrome browser, you've been using something called Speedy, SPDY, the Speedy protocol, which actually formed the basis for the HTTP2 protocol. Okay, so what is QUIC all about? In a nutshell, the idea behind QUIC is it's based on UDP instead of TCP, which means it's not acknowledged. And if it's not acknowledged, that means you can reduce the impact of latency on your network connections. And so that gaming tends to use UDP. Voice over IP tends to use UDP because for those sorts of communications, if you didn't get there, it's too late. You're not going to resend it. It doesn't. So you're just going to use the most efficient transport as you possibly can to get it there. And so Google is kind of tweaking some things with UDP inside of QUIC. And the idea here is, a couple of things that they're adding: congestion control, automatic retransmission. So it's somewhat more reliable than a pure UDP. And so the idea here is, over a high latency connection, you use QUIC to make a connection much more quickly. Now, I don't know what you're going to be able to do with QUIC ultimately, because if you know anything about HTTP, like using your web browser, it is TCP based. It's not like you can, hey, I'm going to use QUIC now for HTTP. That's not how the spec works. So it's interesting. And it's another, again, one of those Google experiments, but Google experiments kind of have a way of making themselves into some sort of a standard, and as they've done some early tests here, users who connected to YouTube over QUIC report, and I'm quoting this from the article here, about 30% fewer rebuffers when watching videos because of QUIC's improved congestion control and loss recovery over UDP. Users on some of the slowest connections also see improved page load times with QUIC. What do you think about QUIC?
It sounds interesting. I guess I'm wondering how we're doing, detection of when there's a drop or whatever. If it's not There's no, handshake really going on. There's no, check-in. We received that. No, we didn't receive that. I'm wondering, and I don't know that the article went into it, but I'm wondering what the mechanism is there for.
So the article didn't go into it, but there is an IETF draft kicking around. Supposedly, I didn't look it up yet, but supposedly the IETF is if Google has submitted a draft to the IETF, the intent would be, let's standardize this thing and do something with it.
Sure.
So all of that data would have to be spec'd inside the draft. And I mean, Google's got code. They're doing something with this and testing it. It's not just what happens so often. The IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force drafts are, they go there and then they die.
Unicorn. It's where unicorn tears go to die.
Well,
right?
This is something that's actually working. That's something that they've been doing testing with and so on. And so I'm sure there's some meat there. So
it's a very interesting concept. Yeah. There's definite applications for it.
Efficiency with reliability. That's a good thing. And so another article here. Here's some absolute trivia for you. Why do your knuckles crack? Now, Eric, you knew this from your gut. You thought everybody knew this, right?
I thought it was relatively common knowledge. There's synovial fluid between your joints. It acts as a cushion, a barrier between the joints so they don't rub together. Cartilage serves similar purpose, but when you crack your fingers, you're popping that synovial fluid sac. I thought this was common knowledge. Apparently not, but.
Well, I guess that part is common knowledge.
Oh, okay.
But then specifically how the sound is formed was in question. Yes, it's got something to do with the fluid going into that void that's created in your joint. But someone actually went to the trouble to figure this thing out using an MRI. So they're actually looking in real time at a person while their knuckles were being cracked to determine exactly what it is that causes the noise as tied to synovial fluid. So there's a guy who's some kind of a knuckle cracking champion. His last name's Fryer. I didn't know there was such a thing. You can be good at anything, I guess. Kids, aspire to great things. Can you crack your knuckles really well? You can be world champion at that. It could be you.
I can do songs with my knuckles.
So this guy, last name Fryer, his fingers were inserted one at a time into a tube attached to a cable. So I'm quoting the article here. This is a CNET article. Links will be in the show notes. This tube slowly pulled on each finger until the knuckle cracked. And in each instance, it was absolutely the formation of the bubble in the synovial fluid, not like the evacuation of the bubble after it was done. The formation of the bubble in the synovial fluid that was associated with a popping sound occurring within 310 milliseconds.
So my finger cracks have a latency of 310 milliseconds. Gotcha.
All right, network nerds listening to this show, you now know the packet over knuckle crack is a 310 millisecond delay.
We've got to work on the technology to get that delay down or start using QUIC.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so the next item on the list here is there's a recent study was completed searching 100,000 galaxies for signs of alien life. And, there are other searches out there. Obviously, there's SETI is the big name.
Yep.
But from the article, basically, they're trying to determine whether an advanced spacefaring civilization that uses large amounts of energy from its galaxy stars to power their computers, spaceflight communication, something that we can't yet imagine. Fundamental thermodynamics tells us that this energy must be radiated away as heat in the mid-infrared wavelengths. This is quoting the assistant professor of astronomy and astrophysics at the Center for Exoplanets and Habitable Worlds at Penn State University. The guy's name is Jason T. Wright. So basically, they're looking for signs of technology, essentially, in the mid-infrared wavelengths, and they've scanned 100,000 galaxies here looking for this information, and basically come up dry.
Yeah.
100,000 galaxies, that's a lot of star systems to scan on.
It's a lot of galaxies, but so I have a couple of questions about this. And one thing is the article makes the point that 100,000 is just scratching the surface because there's billions upon billions of star systems and galaxies that we can go out and look at out there.
Yeah.
The suspicion quoted in the article is the number of galaxies out there is at least 100 billion. So if we searched 100,000, that is less than 100 billion by a lot. So it's not like we didn't find anything in 100,000 galaxies. Who cares? We took one drop of water out of the ocean, didn't find what we were looking for. Yeah, what do you know about that?
Yeah, it's kind of like I lost my keys in the yard, and I searched a 1 meter by 1 meter square and didn't find them, so they must be gone.
That's right. The other thing that I was wondering about is, okay, they're only searching for this one specific thing. I mean, they're basically making an assumption that intelligent life out there and with growing civilizations are going to have this very particular heat signature. And we're also searching over vast distances. Can we really be that granular from this far away to effectively detect what's going on out there? I mean, I guess they know what they're talking about. They're the scientists and the astrophysicists and all that stuff. I don't want to second guess them. It's just, that's kind of a natural question that makes me wonder. It kind of feels Star Trek-y,
Yeah.
I can tell that someone was here. Follow their ion trail, their warp signature, all that kind of stuff. Like, okay.
Well, clearly we need to get Neil deGrasse Tyson on here. That's
he'll be right over.
Yeah, I'll just call him up.
No doubt.
I follow him on Twitter. He knows who I am. But I agree on that. The spectrum that they're searching on, the specifics that they're looking for. I mean, there's multiple problems with searching for intelligent life out there, and that's a big one. And the other one is, the fourth dimension piece here. If there ever is or was intelligent life out there, who knows if we've missed them? You agree to meet at a certain place, XYZ coordinates. But if you don't agree to meet at a certain time, you're going to miss each other.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, because how far away are a lot of these galaxies that we're surveying, and how old is the light signature by the time it gets to us?
Right. I mean, you could be talking about hundreds of thousands of years or more in these really remote sections. It depends on what, galaxies they're looking at, what segment of the sky. If intelligent civilization existed, maybe it was 100 million years ago, so we missed them, So, I mean, it's an interesting piece, and it's interesting and useful study, but I think it's a very thin sliver of the research on the topic.
All right, at this point in the show, we want to introduce a feature we hope to do regularly called Deathwatch.
Deathwatch.
Technology that is about to die. And we're calling it on Tidal very early on. This is Jay-Z's music service, Tidal, if you've heard of it. He's intending to compete against Spotify and Pandora and those sorts of music services. Last I checked, it was $20 a month to stream from Tidal. And his goal of the reason he was charging that much isn't so that Jay-Z can be more rich. Well, it probably is, but he's saying it's so that artists can be compensated better and get more money out of it. And therefore, you're going to pay more per month for this service. It's going to die, isn't it?
It's totally going to die. That's my take on it. I mean, the problem out of the gate here is you have, it's Madonna and Jay-Z and Beyonce and I think Jack White and a few others.
Yes.
And they're trying to champion this for the artists movement where, artists don't make enough money. Mm-hmm. Their net worth is like $2.2 billion, just the 5 or 6 founders of the company, which tells me that, it is possible. Now, I understand that with Spotify and things like this, Pandora, the payment rates are very low. And I'm not arguing the fact that artists probably are entitled to a bit more of the share. But I think that the problem here isn't the streaming services. I think the problem is the record labels.
Yes, I agree with that completely in the sense that if you dig into this and you start looking at the kinds of deals that artists get out of major record labels, it's not that the streaming services are undercompensating. It's that the percentage of the compensation that goes to the artist happens to be very small through no fault of the streaming companies, but because of the contractual obligations that those artists have signed to get out on that record deal, to make that record and have it go out the door, they gave up X percentage of their income to the record company. And the record company takes that money for their profits, of course, but also to do the marketing and to do the packaging of the material and to do distribution of the music and, and so on and so on. And so to a point, it is what it is. You can change the distribution model, but it doesn't mean artists are going to get more as a percentage basis anyway.
Right. And whether the record labels want to admit it or not, that business model is going to die. And they're going to fight it kicking and screaming. But digital distribution, indie artists are out there and they're making a name for themselves and getting out there and doing these things. And I just don't see Tidal making an impact, enough of an impact to even cover their costs personally. And it's interesting that they already lost their CEO. Andy Chen left. Yeah, they launched, and then 30 days later, or whatever it was, he left. But he was quoted, he basically said, artists deserve to be paid for their efforts, and Tidal's higher prices reflect this. He said, quote, music should not be free and people should pay, end quote, which sort of flies in the face of 100 years of radio broadcasting.
Yes.
And again, we're not debating whether artists should be fairly compensated. It's the model that is currently being followed is broken in that regard for them to be fairly compensated. So I'm calling Deathwatch pretty soon on Tidal.
Yep, it'll be dead soon. We'll put it on the list. Tidal. Okay, so that's news for this show, and we're going to move into our past segment now. And as Eric and I were planning this thing, we both said Commodore 64 because we had them as troubled youths growing up. So, okay, the Commodore 64. I'm just going to read to you this section from Wikipedia. So I'm acknowledging the next until I tell you I'm done quoting them. This next bit comes from Wikipedia, who did a bang up job on the history here of this platform. And if you've never heard of the Commodore 64, you'll have a pretty good idea of what it is shortly. Here we go. In January 1981, MOS Technology Incorporated, Commodore's integrated circuit design subsidiary, initiated a project to design the graphic and audio chips for a next-generation video game console. Design work for the chips named MOS Technology VIC-2, Video Integrated Circuit for Graphics, and MOS Technology SID, Sound Interface Device for Audio, was completed in November 1981. So we're going back 81 to 2015, so we're going back in time here. Was this 35 years?
34-ish years.
Okay. So Commodore then began a game console project that would use these new chips called the Ultimax, or alternatively the Commodore Max Machine, engineered by Yash Terakura from Commodore Japan. The project was canceled after just a few machines were manufactured for the Japanese market. Okay. Well, at the same time, Robert Bob Russell, the system programmer and architect on the VIC-20, which is another Commodore machine, and Robert Bob Yanis, engineer of the SID, were critical of the current product lineup at Commodore, which was a continuation of the Commodore PET line aimed at business users. With the support of Al Charpentier, he was the engineer of the VIC-2, and Charles Winterbull, manager of MOS Technology, they proposed to the Commodore CEO, Jack Tramiel, a true low-cost sequel to the VIC-20. And okay, so the VIC-20 is it's another computer that you could have bought, another PC-style machine. Okay, Tramiel dictated that the machine should have 64K of random access memory, RAM, although 64K of dynamic random access memory cost over $100 US at the time. That's so small. He knew that DRAM prices were falling and would drop to an acceptable level before full production was reached. In November, Tramiel set a deadline for the first weekend of January to coincide with the 1982 Consumer Electronics Show, the same one we still have today. Right. The product was codenamed the VIC-40 as the successor to the popular VIC-20. The team put the whole thing together, and the machine incorporated Commodore BASIC 2.0 in ROM. BASIC also served as the user interface shell and was available immediately on startup at the ready prompt. So you powered up a Commodore 64. That's the first thing you saw was the ready prompt. Yep. I'm running BASIC and I'm ready. And then you can start typing in BASIC commands. Imagine that as your shell. Okay, so the C64 made an impressive debut at the January 1982 CES, and as was recalled by production engineer David A. Zembicki, all we saw at our booth were Atari people with their mouths dropping open saying, how can you do that for $595? And the answer was vertical integration. Due to Commodore's ownership of MOS Technology's semiconductor fab facilities, each C64 had an estimated production cost of $135. Okay, so now, how much of this thing did they sell once it got off the ground? Although rumors spread in late 1983 that Commodore would discontinue the C64, which not even close to the truth, Commodore sold about 1 million Commodore 64s in 1985 and 3.5 million by mid-1986. Although the company reportedly attempted to discontinue the C64 more than once in favor of a more expensive computer, such as the Commodore 128, Demand remained strong. In 86, Commodore introduced the 64C, which is a redesigned C64, which Compute magazine saw as evidence that, contrary to C64 owners' fears that the company would abandon them in favor of the Commodore Amiga and the 128, the C64 refuses to die. The C64 introduction also meant that the Commodore raised the price of the C64 for the first time, which the magazine cited as the end of the home computer price war. Software sales remained strong. Microprose, for example, in 1987, cited the Commodore and IBM PC markets as its top priorities. So in 87, we got stuck with the C64 going on strong. I mean, this is getting to be a 5-year-old computer at that point.
Yeah, that's a lifetime.
So by 1988, Commodore was still selling 1.5 million C64s worldwide, although Epyx, EPYX, another software company, Epyx CEO David Shannon Morris cautioned that there are no new 64 buyers or very few. It's a consistent group, but it's not growing. It's going to shrink as a part of our business. So now by 1988, we're finally starting to see the decline of the C64. One computer gaming exec stated that the Nintendo Entertainment System's enormous popularity, 7 million sold that year, almost as many as the number of C64s sold in the first 5 years, had stopped the C64's growth. And Trip Hawkins stated that Nintendo was the last hurrah of the 8-bit world. Although demand for the C64 dropped off in the US by 1990, it was still popular in the UK and in other European countries. In the end, economics and not obsolescence ended the C64 market status. In March 94 at CeBIT in Hanover, Germany, Commodore announced that the C64 would finally be discontinued in 1995, which in computing, that's an astonishing run. Commodore stated that the C64's disk drive was more expensive to manufacture than the C64 itself. Anyway, by 1994, the company finally filed for bankruptcy. Thank you to Wikipedia for all of those bits of data. And there's lots more in that Wikipedia article if you go up and research Commodore 64. So I had one of these things, and you had one of these things too?
I had one as well, yeah.
Yeah. What do you remember about it?
The year was about 1989, I think, and I had my Nintendo, my NES for about 3 years at that point. Maybe 2, I forget. And I just remember, getting it. It was used from an aunt or something like that. They couldn't figure out how to work it or something, so they figured give it to the kid who takes the vacuum apart. What could possibly go wrong? Right. And so I remember just sort of unboxing it and really beyond, some very rudimentary experience with computers at school, like an Apple 400 or something like that. I forget. It was really the first computer that I used. And so, I sat down with the manual that sort of taught you the basics of, basic, and, learned 10, echo, 20, go to, all that. And just thought that this was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. Look, I can change the color of the text,
yes.
And things like that. And then I didn't even have all the peripherals attached. I was given it with the tape drive. I did not have a disk drive, but I had the tape drive.
And by tape drive, we mean a cassette tape. So you could load programs off of the magnetic tape and the old-fashioned cassette tape into this thing, and it made a lot of funny noises.
Yeah, there was this flight simulator game I can't recall the name of, but I remember, you'd enter in the command fastidiously checking the instruction manual to make sure you were doing it right. Hit enter, and then you'd hear the for about 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the game would load. So, but it was this magic device that could make things happen, and I could control, to some degree. It was my fledgling steps into computing, but such, good memories of being able to make it, do things.
Now, I thought it was interesting that the Wikipedia article really stressed how it was a gaming machine, and in the gaming world. And it certainly had that. It had a cartridge slot in the back, so you'd have to, of course, power it down first. And then, put the cartridge in, power the thing up, and it would load a game, whatever the game was. And if you had a disk drive or a tape drive, you could load games in that way. I do remember that stuff, but it's not actually the first thing that comes. My father would probably contradict this because he has reminded me recently how when I was 14, I was pretty awesome at video games, and he despaired for my future because I did play a lot of games on the Commodore 64, Defender and Jumpman and Centipede, Pole Position, and whatever else I played. But I did spend time coding as well with BASIC. So the Wikipedia article mentioned Compute magazine, and we got that. And one of the features in that magazine, I'm going back a long time, so maybe my memory is faulty, but my memory of Compute magazine is that included basic programs in the back. And how did you get them into the computer? You friggin' typed them in. And I did.
Yeah.
I would sit, and if there were programs that looked interesting to me, I would type them in. There's this one I remember called, I think it was called Trenchfire. And Trenchfire was a game that was kind of like it was supposed to model the Star Wars trench warfare that happened on the Death Star at the end of, when Luke drops the bomb and blows up the Death Star and saves the day. Well, they spend a lot of time in the trenches with the X-Wing and being chased by the TIE fighters and stuff. And I was like, oh, that is awesome. I got to type that. So I typed that sucker in, and mostly it was just, I didn't exactly know what was going on, but I would type all this stuff in and make it all go. And I would enjoy playing the game. And then I discovered sprites. And sprites you could program them by typing in arrays of numbers. If you knew how to type them in the right way, you'd load a sprite, which would create a graphic figure on the screen. So I changed the Trenchfire default spaceship, whatever it was, into something I thought was cooler. I designed it on graph paper and figured out all the numbers and then plugged it in that way.
Elite Haxor.
Yeah, so much.
That's really cool. I mean, come on.
But the Infocom games, though, too. Didn't you say you would mess with like a Zork kind of a game or something?
Yeah. Well, so my buddy and I at the time, I mean, obviously I'm a few years younger than you, but we were, this was 9, 10, 11 years old, and we would write our own Zork style games.
Yeah.
And we spent the better part of a summer just writing this one, choose your own adventure, essentially, is what it is, because you make a decision and it goes to line 340 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we spent hours every day for weeks writing this thing, and it was terrible. But let's be honest. But it was so fun to do.
You were describing. I did the same kind of a thing too. I didn't know we were independently, developing Infocom competitors, but simul-dorking. I love it. But I had done that too, because I had played Zork and was just mesmerized. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I wanted to do something like that. Only I wanted to improve the interface. Because I was annoyed to go into a room and then not know. Let's see. From this room, can I go north, south, east, west, up, down? What was it? So I actually built this system that would store for each room in an array. It had a number associated with it. And then I would use binary math. I would use an XOR operation to determine what my options were. So the longer the number was, the more bit positions I had to work with. And each bit position I could use to store some attribute of this object.
Oh, okay.
So if I wanted to know, can I go north, south, east, west, those would all be bits either flipped on or off. I would do the math operation, and then based on the result I got from the XOR, I could determine, okay, position 4 is a 1, and therefore I can go north. And then I could display that on the screen in the header. So I made this whole thing that would describe how to go. It wasn't the most efficient thing ever, if you think about it.
It's still way cooler than mine.
But that worked. I was trying to figure out how to integrate objects. Okay, what kind of attributes would I want to store about an object? Well, if it's a box, it would have a color, and it could be either open or closed. And it just got to be this huge
monstrosity
problem and at that point I was like, well, I know that I could do it, and the challenge is over. So I'm not going to actually do it, because that would be a lot of time.
Yeah.
I just got to quit.
Yeah.
Oh, but
taking on company-sized, aspirations as a teenager probably wasn't the best.
Plus, I was just making it up as I went in BASIC. I wasn't a coder as such. I was just hacking my
figuring
way
it out
through
and having a blast.
I had a spiral binder that had all the basic commands in it as a reference, so I'd look those up and try to figure out what they could do. So you do like string manipulation, and that was my first taste of it. And all that stuff now, I still use that kind of stuff.
Right.
In Perl,
regular
Python
expressions.
Expressions, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was definitely fun. If you wanted to show off your elite Haxor skills when the Commodore 64 was on display, you could walk in and do a peek or a poke and change the color of the screen. Yeah.
Freak
like
everyone out. The screen is pink. What?
Did you have a koala pad?
I did not. No.
So the koala pad was this touch input device that came with a stylus, and you could draw with it.
It's like a Wacom tablet 30 years before.
Yeah, and way smaller.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could draw with the koala pen.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't
in
great.
Giant pixels.
In giant. That's exactly why it wasn't great.
Look at my smiley face.
Well, of course the koala pen people would tease you with, look at these amazing pictures, and they'd have this beautiful landscape drawing that someone, even in huge pixels, had made look amazing.
Right.
You're like, I can totally do
pixel
that.
Art, yeah.
You cannot totally do that.
No.
It was fun though.
No, you can't.
Oh. Was not the music amazing on the Commodore 64 though? For the time?
It really was. I mean, what they were able to do with I forget what the acronym for it, the SID.
Yeah, it was the SID, exactly. Yeah,
unbelievable. I mean, the 8-bit era really took music. I mean, from the Atari lack of music, I guess, the bing bong,
right,
to like fully almost orchestrated.
Yeah.
Chiptune music it's astonishing what some of the composers that wrote for 8-bit systems were able to do.
Yeah. I have some demos, or had some demos from back in the day that were, you just get blown away by how
layered melodies and it's astonishing.
Yeah. Well, the Commodore 64 was all that. I mean, and just our memories of this thing and some of the accessories for it kind of tells you why it was so popular.
Why it ran for 14 years.
And it was affordable.
Yeah.
You just, it wasn't as fussy as a PC. It was,
you plugged it into your TV and
off you went.
Yeah.
Pretty cool stuff.
It was its own keyboard, I mean.
That's right. This thing was right.
Clack, 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 clack.
It could have been a sweet keyboard. Now that I type really fast, I kind of wonder how I'd do on a keyboard like that.
And long travel and loud clicks.
Yeah. Well, there's some people that love that style keyboard, though.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
People pay big bucks for mechanical action. Yeah.
Commodore 64, we miss you. We miss you very much.
We do.
Although, if you want to go to the memories.
Yeah, there are a number of emulators out there. And I actually just messed around with one the other day. I do still have my Commodore in a box, but I didn't want to, take it out and all that. Plus, in the interest of the show, I thought it would be good to at least be able to recommend some emulators. And there are several that are actually pretty good. You turn on the emulation and you're sitting at the prompt ready to ready. And so I'll briefly, again, we'll put this in the show notes, but there's CCS 64. There's Vice, which, is a play on the Vic name. It's VICE. And then there's Comeback 64. That one I didn't actually use. I did fire up CCS 64 and Vice, and they're both, I mean, it's like looking at a tiny little Commodore 64 on your computer monitor.
Did you have enough memory for it?
It was tough. Yeah. Cramming 64K into 8 gigs was pretty rough. But it's interesting how you handle virtual devices and, virtual tapes and the interfaces. It's a little less intuitive than just plugging in the device and telling it what to do. But it's an interesting exercise. And if you've never used one, you should at least try out the emulator and at least, hear the bings and boops and see that ready prompt and mess around with it.
Take a trip back in time, kids.
Back in my day, we had 64K of RAM, and it was good enough.
So as we look to the future, we have well, I'll tell you what. I am mesmerized by power sources. So some of you that listen to Packet Pushers might know that I disappear into the wilderness and go hiking now and again. And, of course, powering your devices while you're out there is a thing. It's a concern.
Kind of is, yeah.
So, I mean, naturally you'd think, oh, you want solar. That's the answer. But the problem with solar and being out in the wilderness is a lot of times you're under tree cover because you're hiking along in the woods. And so you don't have direct sunlight, or it's a cloudy day. You can't count on that. And solar panels, as most of us know, not terribly efficient, and still not efficient. And tomorrow, guess what? They're still not going to be efficient. Maybe eventually they'll be good, but plus hiking around the wilderness with a solar pack on your back sounds like a good idea. But actually, you need a lot of surface area, and it's there's some packs that have solar like built into the back and stuff. But they're more gimmicky than anything. Yeah,
you're not going to gain any appreciable voltage, especially if it's just strapped to your back while you're hiking. If it folds out and you have 4 12-watt cells or something, but again, you're carrying all that extra weight. Solar is not really the solution for a hiker. It's one thing to be, house mounted or, even a larger portable device that you bring to an established camp that you have or something like that. But yeah, if you have cloud cover, poor weather, shade because of trees, if you're hiking up a mountain, guess what? There are trees, like you said.
Yeah.
The ability and the speed with which it would charge a device
it's a trickle charge at best.
Absolute best. And that's in direct sunlight, So yeah, you found something that kind of tickled your fancy.
Well, right. So I mean, my current solution is I use a 20,000 milliamp pack that's good for 4 days to charge your phone, once a day, something like that. That's okay. It's not a great solution for long distance stuff. But there's a Kickstarter project here called Craftwork. And what Craftwork is, it's butane powered power cell. So butane, it's a natural gas sort of a fuel. It's used in campfire stoves, and it's pretty readily available. And it's never been easy to convert that into electricity, at least not in a portable form factor. And that's what Craftwork is doing. Their power cell, you can charge it up with a butane cartridge. It charges very quickly, like in about 3 seconds or so. And then internally, it uses that butane to create an electrical supply. So as I'm reading the stats from the Kickstarter page for Craftwork, they say one filling supplies energy for 11 iPhone charges. It's pretty small and light. They give dimensions of 3.9, about 4 by 3 by a little over 1 inch high at 7 ounces. So, I mean, weight is always a concern for people that travel and backpack. 7 ounces, just under half a pound. It's tolerable for what you get out of it. You can refill it an infinite number of times. So in theory, this thing never runs out because it's taking butane. So it's opposed to like a lithium cell battery inside that, might eventually no longer hold a charge very well. This thing, it says infinitely refillable. And again, like we were talking about the fuel source, it runs on standard camping gas or commercially available lighter gas. And you can get them anywhere. And they say can be obtained very cheaply all over the world. And it says you'll be ready to go immediately after filling and totally independent for weeks. Weeks is maybe a bit of an exaggeration because it depends on how heavy you are and how much crap you haul with you into the wilderness.
Yeah, and are you willing to carry some more butane refill canisters? I mean, they're not terribly heavy, but it's one more thing to carry.
It's one more thing, yep. Right? One more thing. So this to me is interesting, and I'm really keen to see this thing go into production because I had done some homework on this in the past. And a butane as an electrical power source is kind of a unicorn. It's like, yeah, people always talk about it, and then it never happens. So it's kind of like cold fusion and a lot of these other ideas that come. We can do this for energy; it'll be amazing, and then you just can't because the science of it is too hard to tech your way through, and you don't end up with a product.
Right.
But you look at Craftworks; they've got their history here. They say the concept March 2008, proof of concept July 2011, first prototype November 2014, Kickstarter campaign December 2014, and then setup of production line March 2015, field testing August 2015, adjustments to final prototype end of November 2015, and then start of big time production ramps up at the end of this year. December 2015 is the plan. So will this thing happen?
I mean, they've if you look at that timeline, they've been working on this for 7 years.
Right.
So I would think they would have given up if it wasn't realistic at this point. But the proof of concept and the original concept, the proof of concept were several years apart, right? Over 3 years apart from the concept and proof to the prototype, which was another 3 years. Mm-hmm. So it really sounds like they've done their homework. And these guys aren't really slouches, it would seem.
No, it feels like the real deal. But I'm just such a skeptic.
Yeah, a little bit cynical, the cynical nerd syndrome.
but if this actually happens, I'm pretty keen on this. That kind of power to be out and about with is awesome. So things that I can see as possible concerns: safety, production runs and quality, potentially, what is its longevity once you have the thing? It's infinitely rechargeable. Yeah, but if it's got quality concerns, then does it break after a while? what's it going to end up costing, which in part will be driven by demand.
What quality components will be inside to keep production costs down.
I mean, it looks so good. Power output 2 watts. Voltage output is 5, which is perfect for charging USB devices, of course. Working temperature minus 15 degrees centigrade to plus 55 degrees centigrade. So it works up to really hot, not so cold, which could be a concern. I do hike in midwinter. Will it charge my stuff if things are cold? Of course, the part of that, does my stuff even work when it's that cold? This is another question. My iPhone doesn't.
Yeah.
If it starts to fall below, say, 20 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, below 0 centigrade, it's
Yeah, you got to keep it strapped pretty close to your body if you want to keep it warm enough.
And even then, you only got seconds to take some pictures, and then you better get it warm again, or you're kind of out of luck. So.
But yeah, it looks like a cool device. The form factor, I mean, it's slim. It should be easily packable into a side pocket of a backpack or something like that. So it's really interesting.
Well, all right, that's it for show number 1, Citizens of Tech. We hope you enjoyed. Please leave us some feedback in the show notes. This will be, since we're starting this as a trial, it's going to be on packetpushers.net. Look for the community show links, and you will find this show. And the show notes will be there, and you can leave comments there about what you thought. You can also send us an email. For the moment, we'll just do a trial email, packetpushers@gmail.com, which is the one you know us by. We'll accept all your feedback there, what you thought of the show. And if the show is great and you like it and it becomes a thing, it'll get its own channel, its own website.
How exciting.
Its own Twitter account. and we'll drive it from there. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.